This story goes all the way back to California in 1971. Al Berry and his friend Ron Moorhead have come to the Sierra Nevada mountains to investigate mysterious noises reported by a bewildered group of hunters. What their microphone picks up becomes the first of a series of recordings now known as the Sierra Sounds. The recordings capture a series of guttural grunts, howls, and growls thought to be made by an alleged Bigfoot.
Very first sounds were very aggressive, could be considered very scary, but again, they weren't coming after us, so we don't know the intent, we don't know their agenda, we don't know what it was.
Ron claims that later he even interacted with these mysterious creatures before getting his first glimpse of one.
I was responding back to them, and that was probably the most unique Bigfoot encounter I've ever had.
Field researcher Cliff Barrickman says the Sierra Sounds are the gold standard of Bigfoot vocalizations.
I've spoken to several witnesses that have reported this kind of sound. That says something about the authenticity of not only their sighting, but these sounds.
The recordings range from guttural growls to wild whoops to something that almost sounds like language.
There's a retired cryptolinguist from the US Navy. He's realized that there are phonemic patterns that repeat in the sounds. Those are words. Sasquatches might be talking to one another.
Now, here's the thing about Bigfoot sounds. They're easy to fake and easier to misidentify. We've heard examples of both. So let's dial things down a bit and check in with our experts. Zoologist Roxy Farman notes that there are no known primates in California, but whatever made these sounds is big.
The sound is really loud and it's of quite a low pitch and frequency, so it travels far. So it's likely that it came from a large animal.
Next, we bring the recordings to soundscape ecologist Dr. Ben Gottesman.
So here we have 3 phrases.
First, Gottesman examines the guttural sound. Next, the whooping.
The second has these low to high upsweep.
And finally, the chatter.
And those almost sound like words.
The question, could those come from any known large animals native to the area?
We're now going to listen to the sound of an elk bugling. The sound of an elk bugling has much longer tonal signals. This is not a match. Now let's listen to the sounds of a black bear. While the frequency range is similar, the shape and complexity of the signals are totally different. The Sierra Sounds are on a much more advanced level.
Gottesman also rules out an assortment of smaller creatures since they lacked lung capacity to create calls that loud and low. Gottesman also notices that whatever made these sounds has an enormous vocal range.
If this is produced by a single creature, there's just a remarkable acoustic diversity that this alleged species has. If they are an animal, I can't confidently point to one, especially one that's native to North America.
So could the sounds have been made by other humans?
I do not believe that it is possible for this to be human because it has a great variance of going to very high pitch down to a very low growl, all within seconds. We're not capable of that without blowing out our vocal cords. My conclusion is that they are real recordings of Bigfoot, and I based that on knowing how remote that location was and the impossibility for another human or other thing to have made those sounds.
The Sierra Sounds recordings are legitimate. Scientists and even some linguists point to them as evidence multiple Bigfoots were communicating with each other, as well as with Moorhead and Berry. Our verdict here? Unidentified animal sounds. Regardless of what made them, the Bigfoot legend continues to speak to us. The big question is, are we really listening? It's April 2020 in the woods near Scranton, Pennsylvania. Chase Floyd, a science teacher, is investigating mysterious howling and whooping noises that he started hearing the night before. Chase continues to record as he explores the area. He now suspects the noises he's hearing were made by a Sasquatch. Let's take a closer listen. It sounds like a strange whooping noise. As Chase seemingly moves closer to the source of the sounds, his breathing gets faster and more labored, but he forges on anyway.
Right now, I'm starting to get lightheaded. I really don't feel good right now.
As I kept going, I started feeling nauseous. I got to a point where I was like, I just kind of want to get out of here and lay down. So I've done some research on unusual animal sounds. So a lot of like canines make weird noises, but nothing that would make the sounds that are in the video. At least not that I know of in Pennsylvania.
Once Chase shares the video, it racks up over 600,000 views. Field researcher Ken Gerhardt says the animal sounds recorded by Chase are all too familiar.
I've actually heard similar vocalizations, and these are definitely attributed to the Bigfoot phenomenon.
What's more, Gerhardt thinks Chase may be experiencing Oming, a phenomenon first described in Native American folklore dating back 2 centuries. Oming is said to be an overwhelming energy experienced in close proximity of a Sasquatch. It manifests itself in a variety of symptoms, including temporary paralysis.
I feel good.
So Oming is described as a type of infrasound. The theory behind predators utilizing this infrasound is that it is a way to disrupt, confuse, or disorient their prey animals.
If Bigfoot actually exists, then Oming may be a predatory mechanism, or maybe it's a defense mechanism like a skunk's odor. So there are really 2 questions here, folks. First, what made these sounds? And second, is there anything to this theory of Oming? Soundscape ecologist Ben Gottesman breaks down the sound waves.
In order to find out what these alleged sounds are, let's compare them to some of the mammals in Pennsylvania.
Gottesman starts with elk, which are known to produce bugle calls like this.
It really isn't a match. The frequency range doesn't match up. The harmonic characteristics don't match up. Up next, we have coyotes. The frequency range is much higher, at around 650 hertz. That's barely at the upper range of the alleged whoop.
Gottesman is unable to make any match, but Professor of Biology Floyd Hayes says that infrasound is for real, and while humans can't hear it, they can feel it. In fact, scientists believe tigers can produce a roar under 20 hertz below the human hearing range. That has the power to stun or paralyze an animal. Also, the lower the frequency, the farther the sound can travel.
Infrasound is something that several large species of animals can produce, and some human vocalists are supposedly capable of producing infrasound.
But Hayes has a bone to pick with the idea that Chase is suffering from Oming or any sort of infrasound attack. His behavior just doesn't make sense.
He's not feeling well. He doesn't leave the area, and he doesn't go to relax somewhere. He still stays there and talks.
After further analysis, Dr. Gottesman says that the sounds recorded by Chase Floyd resemble another set of alleged Bigfoot recordings he's analyzed for us in the past.
When I was listening to the alleged sounds, I couldn't help but think back to Ron Moorhead's Sierra sounds.
He's referring to Ron Moorhead's 1970s recordings known as the Sierra sounds, which many consider genuine Bigfoot calls.
On top, we have audio from Ron Moorhead's Sierra sounds. I'm just gonna play this series of 3 whoops, and notice how the third one has a special flourish. And now, and if I ran a cross correlation on these sounds, they would be upwards of 99% similar. It's the same sound. Down to the tape recording artifacts present in the Moorhead tape. This video is a hoax.
So while we can't rule out the possibility that Oming is real and terrifying, it wasn't the cause of Mr. Floyd's symptoms. Our verdict, this is a hoax. These sounds are a copy of the alleged Bigfoot recordings made in the early 1970s. It's January 2022, and Boyd Sims, a Proof is Out There viewer, is on a month-long expedition 50 miles north of Houston, Texas, in the Sam Houston National Forest. He is there to record wildlife sounds, and what he discovers is music to his ears.
I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was shocked. I was in shock.
Boyd has made dozens of strange recordings of what he describes as Bigfoot calls.
I spent years looking for explanations of the audio recordings I have and can't find any animal that makes any of the sounds that I have reported. Sasquatch is definitely here in Texas.
This area of the country has a ton of Bigfoot reports out of it, dating back into the 1800s. I have personally spoken to a dozen or two people that have seen Sasquatches in this area. One fisherman found footprints. They were about 13 inches.
In fact, there are more than 40 Sasquatch reports a year inside the Sam Houston National Forest.
That's a pretty significant number of people that have seen Sasquatches in this area.
Boyd's recordings are hardly the first time an alleged Bigfoot sound was captured. Made in the early 1970s, the Sierra sound recordings are touted as the gold standard of evidence for Bigfoot language. According to one respected linguist, these sounds captured in California's Sierra Nevada mountains reveal an actual intelligent conversation in an, as of yet, undocumented language. Could we be hearing more evidence of Bigfoot talking in Boyd's recordings? We'll let our expert sound off.
The whoops may be the means by which males and females of this relatively solitary, widely dispersed, very rare species find a mate. These loud calls are probably territorial. By comparison, large male orangutans broadcast their territory by a loud, raucous call that booms out through the jungle. They've even developed extensive laryngeal air sacs that act as almost like amplifiers. And so it stands to reason that perhaps Sasquatch have these same air sacs.
Meldrum suggests that these air sacs may also enable Sasquatches to produce infrasound, a low-frequency sound used by animals such as elephants and whales. These sounds allow animals to communicate at great distances and can even affect the physiology of the listener.
It can cause the stimulation of receptors in the brain that will evoke fear and trepidation, as well as other emotions. I've talked to witnesses who said, that their very core vibrated from the intensity and the pitch of these sounds.
Could Sasquatches possibly be using infrasound to keep people away as a desperate effort to keep their dwindling species alive? We checked in with forensic audio analyst Dr. Robert Maher, who first compares the recording to known animals found in the area, starting with the wild boar.
It's making a kind of a chirpy kind of sound rather than a long howl like the Sam Houston recording.
If it's not a boar, could it be another local animal, like the fox? Maher doesn't think so.
Rather than being a howl, it's much more of a modulating kind of thing. So it didn't seem like the fox would be a likely candidate.
However, when it comes to the coyote,
we can see the sound starts at a lower pitch, goes up, and then sustains at that level. And that's similar to what we heard in the Sam Houston recording. I can't say that it's absolutely certain, but it's similar enough that I think that's a possibility.
Okay, so maybe a coyote. But what about the big man himself? Maher checks for a Bigfoot match using the popular Sierra sounds.
We see a continuous sort of tone, but it's very short in duration and tends to be more of a yippy quality, where the observation in Sam Houston was more of a howl. The characteristics are different enough that they're not the same source.
Our verdict? Unknown animal noises. While we have ruled out most of the local wildlife, the coyote was similar, but not a clear match, and the Sierra Sounds had a different tone. Nothing lined up well enough to make a clear call. But if you ever find yourself in the Sam Houston National Forest, like Boyd, be prepared for something strange to happen. Be prepared to record it, and be prepared to run. It's March 1st, 1999, and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, is continuing its deep-sea research along the frozen waters of Antarctica. As they record audio of the water using an autonomous hydrophone array, an unexpected sound emerges. We hear a strange, otherworldly moaning sound emanating from the bowels of the deep. If some sea beast is making this noise, it has to be huge. The sound is loud enough to be heard over a range of 3,000 miles, but where it's coming from exactly, no one knows. Journalist Erin McCarthy says experts were confounded by this underwater roar.
It's believed to have originated between the Bransfield Straits and Cape Adare in Antarctica. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration nicknamed this seriously loud noise the Julia Sound. The Antarctic is home to plenty of wildlife. So one theory is that maybe a known creature created this loud sound.
In fact, the Antarctic waters are home to the largest and loudest documented animal in the world, the Atlantic blue whale. Weighing more than 500,000 pounds, the blue whale calls can be heard for hundreds of miles and can reach decibels louder than a jet engine. But according to Erin McCarthy, theories began to emerge that the sound was made by something more monstrous.
Some have wondered if the Julia noise is actually a sea monster, possibly the Kraken.
The Kraken, one of the most legendary monsters of the deep, was a giant multi-tentacled squid-like creature that dominated the nightmares of sea folk since the 12th century. And while many consider the Kraken to be nothing more than a myth, recent discoveries of ichthyosaur dinosaur bones, some found right here in Antarctica, suggest something killed these 30-foot marine beasts by crushing their chests and twisting their necks by using large tentacles.
Could this be a Kraken?
Cape Adare is the site of the first documented landing on Antarctica. Norwegian explorers arrived there in 1895 and later built 2 huts there, the first known human structures erected on the continent. More than 100 years later, what could be causing the mysterious sounds emanating from the depths of the continent's remote waters? Marine biologist Shay Steingass vetoes the Kraken theory.
The Kraken, which is an incredibly large squid-like sea monster, wouldn't even have the right organs or anatomy to make these sounds. Squids are just cephalopods. Cephalopods don't even really have vocal cords and lungs because they're actually just ocean-dwelling invertebrates.
While all marine mammals can communicate with sound, as can certain fish and even loud clicking crustaceans, cephalopods remain stealthily silent.
So there's nothing on a kraken or squid or octopus that could even make this kind of a sound.
In any case, we checked with forensic sound expert Rob Maher, who first tests the Julia sound against the blue whale.
Comparing the frequency range of the blue whale to the Julia sound, the blue whale is at a lower frequency than the Julia sound. The characteristics of a biological sound underwater don't match what we would see in the Julia sound.
Maher also rules out mechanical sounds like deep-sea drills, since those tend to be regular and rhythmic. This thing sure isn't. So what does that leave us? Maher thinks there's only one remaining possibility that makes sense.
It's likely from geological sources. We also have ice and glaciers that are entering the ocean, and the motion of the ice rubbing against other ice or against the ground or the ocean surface will create sound.
Icebergs make sounds? Turns out we only discovered that in the past 25 years. In fact, these sounds are some of the loudest in the ocean, the equivalent of 200 supertankers, on par with undersea volcanoes and earthquakes, and can be picked up thousands of kilometers away.
If we compare the sound shown here of an actual iceberg event, the characteristics of this tone are similar to what we see in the Julia sound.
Our verdict, icebergs. Such a massive sound like Julia requires a massive force behind it. And in Antarctica, nothing comes bigger. As for our Kraken, he will just have to stay dormant for now. December 2017, Whitsett, British Columbia, Canada. It's a snowy, overcast day in this remote village. Upon hearing something eerie in the woods behind his home, a man pulls out his camera and records this. Take another listen. It's a guttural howl emanating from the forest. The witness pans the camera around, trying to find where exactly it's coming from. Field researcher Cliff Barrickman draws a comparison with these noises and the famous Sierra sounds recorded in Northern California in the 70s.
The Sierra sounds are singularly important in the study of Sasquatches. The sounds represent a wide variety of very strange vocalizations that were emitted from unseen entities in the woods. It sounds like people actually speaking an unknown language.
Important to note, whatever made the Sierra sounds has never been identified. As with the recent sounds in British Columbia, Barrickman thinks they could be the sounds of Sasquatch communicating.
We believe that Sasquatches are probably moving about in kind of loose groups.
Even if they move in small groups like gorillas do, Barrickman says they often spread out.
So, in the kind of habitat they like to live in, they wouldn't be able to see the other individuals in their family groups. They would have to call for them, whether it's mating or socialization or feeding or whatever.
However, some wonder if these sounds could be connected to another recent horror story from the region. Between 2007 and 2019 in the nearby Salish Sea, 20 disembodied human feet encased in shoes and sneakers washed up onto the shore. Some suggest that this could be evidence of a killer Sasquatch, while others think this could be a serial killer running amok. Is this a deranged human screaming in the wild?
Canada is a vast, wild wilderness. Could a serial killer be loose in the woods of Canada? It's possible.
The Harrison River Valley, located to the southwest of British Columbia, is home to the indigenous nation known as the Chehalis. They consider the Sasquatch a sacred caretaker of the land. They even use him as a totem of their nation. Let's see what our experts think about this Canadian creature. Biologist Floyd Hayes fills us in on what we would normally find or hear lurking in these woods.
There are many species of animals that communicate by vocalizing. In general, the sounds are somewhat correlated with the body size of the animal, with larger animals producing louder sounds. The British Columbia wolf is a subspecies of the gray wolf, and it lives in this area and it grows rather large. It makes very loud howling sounds.
That leads us to forensic audio analyst Dr. Rob Maher, who first compares this audio to that of a large wolf.
So we can compare the sound of a wolf So this is a spectrogram of the wolf howl. If we look at the Whitset howl sound, we see more high-frequency information, and the contour is different than the wolf.
So, no exact match for the local fauna. But what about a Bigfoot? Maher brings up the famous Sierra sounds for comparison.
The Bigfoot recording has more energy in the lower frequency range, and it's more of a whoop rather than a shriek sound. They seem to be two distinctive types of sounds.
So no Bigfoot. But what about the idea that the sounds are connected to some disturbed serial killer haunting the Canadian woods? Maher says no.
Trying to make the sounds that are up in the higher range up here in several thousand hertz, I'm a little skeptical that a human could make that sound.
So what could be making this horrific noise? Turns out, maybe nothing. Or nothing real, at least.
In the spectrogram, we can see these vertical dark areas where the sound disappears during the recording. One of the reasons you might have these dropouts would be that the audio had been edited or changed. It raises a lot of questions about the integrity of that recording and whether it's really authentic.
Our verdict? With no exact audio matches and some questionable evidence about the recording, we're going with potential hoax. And while we didn't find a Bigfoot this time, British Columbia's forests cover an area of 149 million acres, the size of France and Germany combined. So there's plenty left to explore.